And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today, we're going to be talking about the most recent offseason ranking via The Athletic. Next, we're going to be talking about if the Chicago Bulls are going to be stuck in the play-in again or if they can trend towards heading out of that this year. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it and let's talk about the most recent offseason ranking here for the Chicago Bulls. And so if you guys want to go and check this out, you can go over to The Athletic. This is written by David Aldridge. And so within this article, the first thing that he talks about with really all these teams is just really what has led them to this point. And then he goes into the skinny or the outlook. And so here it is, just jumping first into just really what got the Chicago Bulls to this point, which is something that we definitely know. So last year, the play-in round, talking about the players that the Chicago Bulls were able to add over the offseason, who they lost, and then also to who is returning from injury. And so when we jump into the skinny here, this is where it begins to get interesting. And so it says that the Bulls aren't getting any points for speed, but they continued their methodical build-up by drafting Essengue, who could team up nicely with last year's first-round pick, Modest Buzelis, and form a promising young forward tandem. Coby White's big jump the last 2 years made ball expendable, so getting more length and defensive versatility in okoro for him was a decent return. Getting Josh Giddey extended before camp is the next expected step, but at some point, Chicago is going to have to be more intentional unless it's cool staying in play-in round hell. All right, and so interesting right there, play-in round hell. I love how David Aldridge talks about the play-in round. And so, I think that this first and foremost is maybe one of the first times that I think we've seen the Bulls talked about positively as far as the rankings are concerned here. And they weren't last. And so I think that that's a good sign. But I think that David Aldridge really talks about some points that are very important. And I think that really when you look at this thing, just from the totality of it, this is probably what AK in this front office is banking on. And let's start with the first point, that it's with really the youth movement. I think that when you look at this team now that's gotten younger, I think it is really banking on the fact that Modest Buzelis is going to take a major step here in year two. You're expecting that Josh Giddey is going to be the player that he was towards the end of the season. And so hopefully he's able to, get these triple doubles and things like that, but not just get the triple doubles. He's getting better as a player, meaning that, his offensive bag gets a little bit more deeper. Defensively, he's competing even more harder there. And these triple doubles hopefully are leading towards the wins. And so also too, with Coby White, this is an important season. It's a contract season for him. And I think that he can definitely still grow a bit, especially with the way that this offense is geared, because he's going to have a ton of opportunities. And I think that this really is going to be really big for Coby White because there is no Zach LaVine. And they're going to be looking for him to do those type of things. And I'm not saying that he's just going to be a guy that you pass it to him and he doesn't, necessarily get it to other players and things like that. Like there's other games or other things in Coby White's game. Like he can definitely still be a distributor. He's shown that he can be, a point guard, but I think he can now focus a bit more on being that scoring guard. And as the attention comes to him, you can trust that Coby White's going to make the best play possible. And so I think he has a chance to take a step forward. But saying all that to say this, you're banking on these guys really taking that step now to really justify this plan that AK is really on. And so, we're hoping that with Noa Essengue, he really can beat the odds, because there's a lot of talk about him just being a guy where it's going to be a real big development season for him. Maybe you see that he could be possibly in the G League a lot. I hope that that doesn't happen. I hope that he really trends towards being more like a Modest Buzelis, because we're hearing things that, hey, he has that same type of mentality. And I thought that when you looked at the summer league with Noa Essengue, you saw a player that was fearless. And I know a lot of people probably aren't going to talk about that. They're going to talk about, him being dunked on and him being airballing and stuff like that. But I saw the encouragement from that because this is a player that was unafraid to come back and shoot that same shot, and he was able to knock it down as summer league went on. So I think he showed confidence there, and he was definitely a guy that he showed confidence towards just going out there and taking contact. He showed you that. He also showed the ability to block shots and things like that. And I think that getting stronger is something that we had said about Modest Buzelis. And clearly you could see that Modest Buzelis, he looks like that he's taken a step forward coming into this season as far as working on himself and getting stronger. So if Noa Essengue can come in with that same type of mentality, and then Coach Billy Donovan can map out that same type of plan here, I think that the Bulls are in a very good situation when you're talking about betting on this youth. And then also, too, I think that what this points to as well is that AK and his plan, it actually would be working in the sense that, one of the things that we talk about with the Bulls is they don't go out and get assets, right? Because they've been trading players on these 1-for-1 swaps, which is definitely not, an ideal situation. Generally, when you see trades happen, picks are involved, multiple players and things like that, but that just really hasn't been the direction that the front office has wanted to take. And so, if you're able to hit with Modest Buzelis and then you're able to hit with Noa Essengue, I think that what happens now is really, I think more people start to lean towards, okay, well, maybe AK in this front office, they know exactly what they're doing. And maybe they see that, hey, they don't need the multiple picks. Maybe they're, just got it down to where, hey, we can hit on these one picks. And just you look back at the Patrick Williams situation and say, hey, look, that was just one where we just didn't hit there. And so, I mean, I think that that's another situation that you think about with this, and just really talking about that article and talking about the timeline that the Bulls are on, and just really the slow process that they have, because it is going to be slower, especially when you're just picking, one time in the draft like that in the first round and once in the second round. And that's if you are, once in the second round, if you keep your second round pick. And so I think the next thing too, to really think about with this, and just going back to the first point of that and just the additions, I also think that if Isaac Okoro comes in and he has the same type of impact that, say, Josh Giddey did in his first season with the Chicago Bulls, I think that this also, too, would really point to the fact that AK in the front office could be onto something, because you once again bring in a younger player that really, it looks like that he has something to prove. He's shown some upside. He clearly got into a situation where his role changed. The team, I think, definitely got better around him, and not to his fault there, but still, he definitely could be a player that could maybe take off in an expanded role. And I do think that he's going to get that chance, because even if you don't like what he does offensively, you've got to love what he does defensively. And I think defense could be his calling card. And because he plays defense the way that he does, you really don't have to run a play for Isaac Okoro. And so he could have that type of impact if he does that. And then also, too, he comes in and he becomes very comfortable with shooting the three ball, because he's going to have opportunities. Teams are going to leave him open. That when they run the fast breaks nowadays, there's players that just run to the three ball and stuff like that. And so the spacing is going to be there for him. And so if he wants to be, that next 3-and-D type of player, he's certainly going to have the runway here. But more so, just pointing this back to the front office, it would show you that, look, the timeline is something where it's not, making a whole bunch of noise, but it's starting to add up. You've gotten younger. Then the players that you're taking chances on are starting to grow in the right direction. And so, I think that that's really what you can take away from this article. And then this last point, I think that David Aldridge makes a very good point as far as this team really having to think about taking a major swing at something, right? Like making this next big move. And I think that the team eventually is going to have to take a move that is going to shake this roster up. What is it going to look like? I'm not sure, because right now the Bulls are definitely focused on getting their salary cap and everything freed up, which they're going to have going into this upcoming season after this one. But you wonder, okay, are the Bulls going to say to themselves, if the younger players take a major step forward, would they consider doing a little bit of an all-in trade? Now that's where it gets a bit questionable, especially for me, because I think that what you would do there is you would speed up your timeline big time. And is that something that you want to do? Because you could, pretty much leverage off your future that way if you're not careful. And I think we've saw that before, when they kind of went all in some of these other trades to kind of assemble the previous team. And so, I think at some point the Bulls are going to have to do that. Are they going to be in that position, maybe next season? I'm not sure about that. But going back to the initial intro here, I think that the Bulls can certainly get out of the play-in situation possibly this year. And I think that by doing so, it would be a huge win. I think that if the Bulls can just qualify for the playoffs, that would be big. And it depends on what they're going to do with some of these expiring contracts. I know that Kevin Huerter has got to be a guy that you have to be thinking about, because I've said this before with Kevin Huerter. He continues to play like a player, or like the player that played with the Atlanta Hawks when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And so that type of experience, the way that he's playing, is certainly going to help this team trend in the right direction. Josh Giddey, he's been on teams that have won their fair share of games. And so that this guy is going to have that type of winning mentality. Coby White and these guys like that. Look, I think that they're hungry and they want to win and want to prove here. And so let's see if the Bulls can take that step. I'm not going to be surprised if they do get out of the play-in situation here. So I think that they can. Hopefully they do. And so you guys let me know in the comments here. What do you guys think about this? Are the Bulls really getting ready to turn the corner, right? Because again, going back to this off-season ranking, I think that this is probably the most positive, really, when you look at it, as far as how the team has shifted, even though the time is not as fast as we would want as fans. But do you think that they are turning the corner? Are they stuck in the middle? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.